Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you yet again another Discussion of the Week video segment right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly. As always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's Discussion of the Week video segment. And before I jump into this week's discussion topic, I want to go ahead and let you all know how the voting turned out in last week's update video. So, you all voted for it. And clearly, by this video being uploaded, you all know that the Discussion of the Week video segment got the most votes for which video will fill in the 4th spot on the weekly lineup. I believe the votes were 70 in favor of the Discussion of the Week and 18 in favor of Comic Book Hollywood. So I'm pretty sure that's not to say that you all don't enjoy Comic Book Hollywood. I mean, the video views speak for themselves, but clearly this is the one that you all wanted to see the most. So here it is. The Discussion of the Week will be the 4th addition to the weekly lineup throughout the month of March, April, and perhaps May. At the end of May, that's the next time I'll have to is it May? I'm not even sure, but until the next time I redo the schedule, Discussion of the Week is here to stay. But with that said, also I want to go ahead and I want to address the Manga of the Month and the Anime of the Month videos, because I also had you all vote for that in last week's update video also. And unfortunately, the votes weren't there. The votes weren't there for the Battle Royale review. Wasn't enough votes. I think there was only like 55. That's clearly not enough votes, and even less votes for the Black Lagoon review. So with that said, here and now I'm going to go ahead and state that the Manga of the Month and the Anime of the Month video segments will be placed on hiatus indefinitely. I don't know when I'll bring that segment back, but that's just what's going on with that. And also, one more thing before I jump into this week's topic about Comic Book Hollywood. Because this week is actually the start of the March schedule, what's going on right now is that I discovered a scheduling conflict at the end of the month. Pretty much the conflict was between the OAW Grand Prix Finals and the Smallville Season 1 review. Those were on the same day. So what happened is this. I'm currently in the works to get the OAW Grand Prix started a week earlier. I am waiting to hear back from all the participants in that. And if I hear back from them tonight, that means that tomorrow will actually be the start of the Grand Prix instead of the 10th, which was originally planned. If that's the case, then that means I can go ahead and I can get the Grand Prix underway soon, 1 week sooner, and that will free up March 31st so I can do the Smallville Season 1 review. So that's what's going on right now. Because of this change in schedule and because of this scheduling conflict, Comic Book Hollywood, same thing. Comic Book Hollywood will go on its seasonal hiatus. Keep in mind, I said it is a seasonal hiatus. Comic Book Hollywood will be back most likely in the summer. But for the rest of the spring, Comic Book Hollywood is going on break. But when it returns, I will pick up with that review of 300. So don't worry, I'm still going to do that. That'll be the first new Comic Book Hollywood out when it returns in the summer. Cool? Alright. So now that I've gotten all of those updates out of the way so that you all are informed, let's get into this week's Discussion of the Week video, which comes to us courtesy of the Last Resort host, once again, with an excellent suggestion for this week's Discussion of the Week. He says, maybe do a Discussion of the Week on adaptations, Game of Thrones, Under the Red Hood, etc. What deserves an adaptation to a different medium? What are the challenges of adapting a franchise? And then some examples of good adaptations or bad adaptations. So, once again, this discussion contains 4 questions. I will tackle each one individually, and that'll be our discussion on adaptations. So, first and foremost, what deserves an adaptation to a different medium? Okay, now, many of you may know that especially nowadays, things get adapted all the time. We have books, we have comic books, we have manga, we even have television shows that get adapted into other mediums, such as film, such as television, such as comic books. I mean, it's very interesting to see how these adaptations takes place, because, as I said, it's not just that one medium does more adaptations than the other. Not so, because you find adaptations done in various mediums. Classic example. Okay, you all know that, of course, multiple films have been adapted from comic book or novel source material. I mean, novels that have been adapted into films, you're talking about The Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, the Harry Potters, Hunger Games, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, Aragorn, so many, and then of course with comic books, there's a multitude of films that have been adapted from comic books. But as I said, it also goes the other way. For an example, Smallville. Smallville is a television series adapted from comic book source material, yet it is continuing in comic books. So you have that exchange. The same can also be done with, for another example of novels into films and then films back into novels, The Godfather. The Godfather is, the films are based off of a novel by Mario Puzo. However, after the films concluded, there have been sequels in novels. So you have that exchange throughout all sorts of mediums as far as adapting certain material. Now, as far as what actually deserves an adaptation, I think that as far as what source material deserves an adaptation, I think it goes, it kind of goes back to my reboot discussion, in which what source material has left the public eye, what source material has kind of fallen out of popularity with the current culture. I think that is the best material to adapt, because it's the same thing as a reboot. You are re-presenting it back into popular culture. You are bringing new life back into the material. That's the material I think deserves an adaptation more so than any. Also, I think that material that deserves adaptations are material that has really created a path, that has really been a trendsetter in its original material. So, for an example, say Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass was a very popular comic book. Now, granted, I didn't like the Kick-Ass film adaptation, but what I'm saying is that was a very viable source to create a film adaptation, because it was a very popular book that was on the rise, that was somewhat controversial, and it was popular among its fan base. And it is also a material that perhaps could be adapted in a way where the general audience would get into it. So that's why I thought that was a good idea for an adaptation. Okay, so what are the challenges of adapting a franchise? And I think this is going to be the question I'm going to spend the most time on, because so many people do not understand what it takes to actually adapt source material. I can actually speak about this from personal experience, because I actually attempted in writing an adaptation. I attempted in writing two screenplays, both of which, one was an adaptation of Dragon Ball Z, and the other was an adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And while for the most part, those screenplays were more of treatments, they weren't full out, fleshed out screenplays. They were treatments in the sense that they were a plan of how I would write each film. But the problem is that, once again, so many people don't understand what it takes to make a good adaptation. And when I say so many people, I'm talking about more specifically fanboys. So what message I'm going to relay, what I need fanboys to understand in watching this video. You listen to me now when I say that you cannot adapt a material 100% in order to make it a good adaptation. Why? Because not everything that relates to one medium can be transferred to the other. Once again, I'm going to say that again so that you all know what I'm trying to say, so you know where I'm coming from. It is impossible to make an adaptation that has 100% of the source material without taking any type of creative liberties and have it be a good adaptation. It's impossible because not everything transfers from one medium to the next. It is impossible. Go ahead, take the time in the comments below. Let me know if you all can think of some good adaptations that had 100% of the source material in it. And I guarantee you, you won't be able to find any because there never is any. Case in point, beautiful adaptations. Two of which I previously mentioned. Look at The Godfather, look at The Lord of the Rings, and look at the Chronicles of Narnia film series. Each one of those films does not include 100% from the source material. There is material that either they leave out, or there is material that they fill in to help the adaptation be more cohesive. They never include 100% of the source material. I can't stress that enough, because so many times you will see fanboys raving and raving about, oh, they didn't include this, or oh, they left it, oh, they changed this, or oh, they added this, and da 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 da. You don't understand what it takes to make an adaptation. It is so fucking difficult. I can't stress that enough. The reason why is because of this. When you take an adaptation, you are not, when you adapt something into either film, into a novel, into comic books, into an animated series, into a TV series, into a radio special, however you adapt it, you are not adapting it for the original fan base. That's just cold hard facts. You cannot adapt it just for the original fan base. The whole point of making an adaptation is so you take that source material and you open it up to a larger audience, into a wider audience. What's the point of making an adaptation for the fucking fan base of the source material in the first place? The only people that's going to buy it are the original fan base. That doesn't make any fucking sense. When they make films, when they make film adaptations of, you know, comic books or novels or this, that, and the other, they have to make that film for general audiences. There's no way possible they'd be able to turn a profit if they catered solely to the fan base. It just can't happen. Why? Because for the most part, for the vast majority of these franchises, with the exception of, say, Lord of the Rings, with the exception of, say, Harry Potter, the fan base are the minority. Listen to me now, because a lot of fanboys don't want to hear this, but this is the truth. When it comes to things like comic books, when it comes to things like anime and manga, video games and whatnot, you are the minority when it comes to the general population. When it comes to moviegoers, you're the minority. That's why the film doesn't cater to you. I can't stress that enough. I don't understand what's so fucking hard to comprehend. I don't get it. Now, granted, there are some adaptations that absolutely don't include any of the source material, and I would say that those are perhaps the worst. But then on the flip side of that, there are some adaptations that include too much of the source material, and that doesn't work either. So with the last couple of minutes I have left, I'm going to go ahead and tackle the last two questions simultaneously. Good adaptations and bad adaptations. Some examples of what I've been talking about. Like I said, good adaptations, as I mentioned before, you're talking about the Godfather series. You're talking about the Lord of the Rings. You're talking about, for the most part, the Chronicles of Narnia. Even though I don't care for those films as much, I would say they're good adaptations. Comic book adaptations. You're talking about the Spider-Man, the first two. Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, those are great adaptations, in my personal opinion. I think those are the best adaptations of comic books ever. Those are the best. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because they take what's most important from the source material, and then they leave certain things out, but they also blend the two. If you go back and you watch the first Spider-Man, you will notice that a lot of what happens in between Peter and Mary Jane in the first film, a lot of that in the comic books was the Gwen Stacy storyline. Like there's a lot of the Gwen Stacy Peter Parker relationship from the comics that they changed into Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Why would they do that? Because Mary Jane is the more recognizable character. You go up to a normal person who doesn't know jack shit about Spider-Man, but they know who Mary Jane Watson is. They don't know who Gwen Stacy is. That was an artistic liberty that the writers took that worked. It worked. It melded together. You see what I'm saying? It made the story more cohesive, and it made it more accessible for the general population. Those first two Spider-Man films are the best examples of that. Beautiful examples. I would also go ahead and argue that the first two X-Men, same thing. Those movies don't follow the comics at all. At all. Those movies don't follow jack shit from the comic books. And yet, they are really good, well put together movies. Same thing goes for X-Men First Class. Any of you all who've read the X-Men First Class comic books, the movie is absolutely nothing like X-Men First Class. But it works as a film. They adapted, they took what they needed, they left out what they didn't need, and they melded and blended it together to make it a good adaptation. Those are all examples of good adaptations. All examples of good adaptations. Now, I know a few of you may say, Larry, you didn't bring up Batman Begins or The Dark Knight. The reason why I don't bring those up is because those aren't adaptations. Hear me now when I say Batman Begins and The Dark Knight are not adaptations. They do not adapt any one story that exists in comic books. Those are originally written scripts that use the source material as inspiration, or that try to build on top of the source material. It includes the Batman universe, it includes the Batman characters, but none of those stories exist in the comic books. They aren't adaptations. Do you follow? They aren't adapted from the comic books. They're original. Just like Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Hellboy 2, The Golden Army is not an adaptation. It's an original story written by Mike Mignola and Del Toro. They wrote that story specifically for the film. It has the comic book characters, it has their universe, but that story does not exist in the Hellboy comic books. Do you follow? Those are some examples of really good adaptations. Bad adaptations. Bad adaptations. First, I want to bring up the adaptation that I thought was bad because it had too much of the source material, and that is Watchmen. The Watchmen film followed the book too much. So much so that I feel like the Watchmen film is not a good adaptation because in essence, it alienates the audience. The only people that are actually going to be able to pick up and really grasp that film is the people who are familiar with the source material. I have a lot of friends who went in knowing nothing about Watchmen, and they didn't get it. They didn't like it, and that's the reason why. I'm not saying that the film is supposed to cater specifically to the general audience, but that's the challenge you take when you adapt something. You have to keep both audiences in mind, the fan base and the general population. You have to do it, otherwise you won't have a successful film. And Watchmen was a perfect example of that, because even though fans of the book love the movie, hell, even I like the movie, despite the fact that I think it's a bad adaptation. It follows the source material too much, and I didn't care for Zack Snyder's creative spin on it. Despite all those things, I still like The Watchmen. I would argue that I love the Watchmen film. I still do. But even I can recognize those flaws in the material. Do you understand what I'm saying? Oh, and case in point, the box office was the biggest result of that, because Watchmen, I believe, opened up to Watchmen opened up to pretty good numbers its opening weekend, and then attendance dropped by 80% the second weekend. Bad adaptations, some examples of bad adaptations that had absolutely nothing to do with the source material. You're talking about well, Superman Doomsday, just off the top of my head, that which had almost nothing to do with the source material. Guido Senki, also known as Tales from Earthsea, if any of you all have seen that Studio Ghibli film that was directed by Goro Miyazaki, not to be confused with Hayao Miyazaki. Goro Miyazaki is his son. That was adapted from the Ursula K. Le Guin Earthsea books, which I'm a huge, those are my favorite books. And that film tried to adapt the third and the fourth book, which is The Furthest Shore and Tehanu. It tried to adapt those two in one film, and that was completely awful. That movie had a whole nother storyline completely separate from the source material. That had nothing to do with Earthsea. So that's a bad adaptation in itself. I would go ahead and argue the same thing for the sci-fi original miniseries of Earthsea, because that tried to adapt the first and the second book. And that didn't do a good job at that either, because they created their whole little story. So those are bad examples those are good examples of bad adaptations. Correction. Also, some other bad adaptations, as I mentioned before, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, as well as Aragon. Horrible adaptations. Because now granted, hang on a minute, I haven't read those books, but I've spoken to fans of the books, and they say, yeah, man, those movies are horrible compared to the books. I heard that the books are so much better. So, but anywho, I'm going at length in this video. I don't want to make this too long. I know this video isn't as cohesive or as tight as I would have wanted it to be, but I mean, what can you say? But I want to thank you all for joining me again for another Discussion of the Week video segment. And in the comments below, please leave your suggestions for next week's Discussion of the Week topic. And also thumb up any suggestions that you see in the comments below that you really want to see. Because of course, as I've stated, I take the suggestion that has the most thumbs ups. So please feel free to do that. And what's coming down the wire later this weekend, what I have is, due to the changes in the schedule that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, tomorrow you will see the anime favorites for March of 2012, and that will be the Tenchi Muyo series. Saturday night, if I hear back from all my contestants tonight, Saturday night on Blog TV, will be the live draft for the OAW Grand Prix. I will let you all know before the draft takes place if in fact it's going down tomorrow night. I will make a separate video letting you all know that it's going down. And then Sunday will be the first in my month of Miyazaki reviews, where I will review Princess Mononoke. But with that said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.